Hey everyone, it's Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Show. And yeah, today I'm actually going to share some airtime, well, with one of my coaches. That's right. We're a coaching organization, but you know what? How can I be a coach if I don't at least have coaches myself? So I'm going to share with you my coach, Mr. Wally Bock. Hi, this is Rod Santomassimo, and welcome to the Massimo Show. The objective of the Massimo Show is to share how you can maximize your personal, professional margin. That's right. Let's make more money in less time. Let's turn chaos into clarity, confusion into confidence, and income into real wealth. Along with sharing my insight on how I grew a multi-million-dollar professional business, we're going to bring you the expert advice from a variety of authors, consultants, and thought leaders who will provide the tools you need to maximize your own personal and professional margin. Welcome to the Massimo Show. Wally, I'm going to do this. Why don't you introduce yourself, sir?
Oh, okay. I can do this. I'm Wally Bock. I grew up in New York. I was a really great kid. I'm really smart, and I write books. And when I got done writing books, I started helping other people write books. And one of the people I helped write books was Rod, which is why we're talking today, because that's what I coach him in. He coaches me by the content of his books, which is way cheaper than his normal stuff. So that's who I am. That's what I do.
Well, yeah. So see, we've got a win-win relationship here, Wally. So look, and when, he is my book writing coach. And we're going to talk about how that has evolved to different roles during the different books based on what he's taught me, because I started actually doing what he taught me to do. And we're going to talk about that. And so if you're interested in maybe writing a book or thinking about the process, you hadn't thought about that. But more importantly, if you have your own business, Wally can share how he grew his business from his passion, writing, right? Wally, let's get started with the Massimo Show. And let's start with you. You talked about you're from New York. I got to ask exactly where again. And so where did you grow up? And when you were in high school, what were your passions?
My dad was a preacher, so I grew up in several parts of New York. When I was in high school, I lived in Midtown Manhattan. If you're anywhere near Manhattan now, go to 54th and Lexington. You will see the giant Citicorp Tower. There used to be a church where the giant Citicorp Tower is, and that's where I grew up. Now, I went to the Bronx High School of Science. That's a Testian high school for supposedly bright kids. So it's kind of a holding pen for nerds. And there were two other choices. I could have gone to Stuyvesant or Brooklyn Tech, but science was the only one that was co-ed. And that was one of my passions growing up, was finding attractive women to date. At that time, I thought I would go on and do something in science. What happened next was that one of my cousins made it to midway in his sophomore year on his daddy's dime without ever going to class. And I realized that is probably what I would do too if I had the opportunity. So after high school, I went in the Marines, and the story goes on from there, but you don't have enough time for it.
Thanks for that, Wally. That was a great little summary of the background. So your father was a preacher, a pastor, and somehow not somehow, we know you're a very bright guy. You're thinking, hey, I could do other things. You went to the Marines. Why books? Tell us how you got started. What was your first book?
The first book, this is a really sexy title, Rod, so get ready. Budgeting for First-Line Supervisors. Come on, doesn't that make your heart rate go up?
Let me write that down so I can read it tonight. Budgeting for First-Line
Supervisors.
Why? Why was this your first book?
Why was it my first book? I got out of the Marines, and I was doing some teaching in a program that the government used to have called Model Cities, helping small businesses. And I started writing some articles about that. A acquisitions editor for a publishing company heard some of my speeches and read a couple of articles and offered me the opportunity to do 4 books. And the first one was Budgeting for First-Line Supervisors. It was for an industrial publishing company. It was exactly right for the time. The editor was a great editor, and I learned a bunch, and it got me started from there. I knew I could do it, so I kept doing it. Sometimes it's my full-time business, sometimes not. Okay, so you dropped a lot of elements there about book writing that come natural to you, but you use these words. And we're going to get into all this. You talked about writing, you talked about a publisher, you talked about an editor, all elements of a great book. They are. I've learned this. So while you did your first couple of books, tell us the next phase of your writing. But the next phase of my writing was just, I was doing other things. I was a corporate fast track executive, but I kept getting fired. So finally, I figured out that the only person who would keep me hired was me. And I started my own business. At that point, what I was doing mostly was helping small companies with marketing. Mm-hmm. And part of promoting that was writing articles. And I wrote a couple of small books. Then on the side, I started writing short books. If you ever got a magazine like Popular Mechanics or one of those things when you were a kid, there were all these ads in the back, little black and white ads. Well, I was placing some of those ads and advertising little books that I made at the local printer and made a tiny little kitchen table business out of it.
Let's peel back, because a lot of you can now appreciate, look, Wally was not fit, like me, absolutely like me, was not meant for the corporate world. We both tried it. We both did okay. It wasn't us. It just wasn't us. So he had a passion, had an interest, said, you know what? I'm better off working for myself. And most of the people listening to this realize you're better off working for yourself. So now you start writing these little short books. You're doing work for yourself. Think about this, folks. Right now, this is amazing, because now, Wally, what years were this? Give us some context. What years were this?
Went out on my own in 1982.
Okay, 40 years ago. We all today still rely, at least we should, on other copywriters, other writers, other marketers, whether it be for a social post or marketing messages. So, Wally, you were way ahead of your time.
I like to think so. I don't think it's true, but I like to think so. What I was good at was finding the story that a business had to tell, finding the romance of it, and turning it into something that helped them get business. That's a dynamite skill to have, but it takes time sometimes to get it out of the person who's actually got the business.
Wow. Let me repeat what I heard him say, because it's still true today. So Wally had a skill of understanding the story behind the business. And if you don't know this by now, folks, it's the story that's going to create the attractiveness, the alertness. Yeah, the sale, it is. So Wally, you are actually crafting stories for your customers. So what kind of clients do you find yourself working with?
Trucking companies, asphalt companies, a roofing company. We wrote a book for the roofing company, Rod, that answered all the questions people always asked them. So that when they had somebody who was going to do a sales call, it was somebody who did commercial roofing, not residential. He'd hand them the little book, which was like 50 pages, and it answered all the basic questions. So they got into the sale faster. They got into the why you should hire me to do all this stuff.
Well, I want to get to the business side. How did you start getting clients? How did people know about, man, we need to hire Wally because he's really good? Back then, how did you market?
Rod, I'm a copywriter. I wrote letters to people. I said, hey, I'm good, I'm great, hire me. And some of them did. That's it. That and the yellow pages were my marketing system.
While we preach the Massimo Group, people should still write letters. And they're challenged to write letters. They are. I mean, let's face it, most people just aren't. Everyone has a talent. Your talent is writing and crafting stories and understanding. Not everyone has that. So do you think letters still work today, or is now with email and Twitter and all that stuff, is that now?
I got nothing against email and Twitter. Twitter is a great business feed for me. But letters are more important than ever. Because if you could write a good letter, it's something your client or prospective client isn't getting. And it's closer, it's more intimate than email. It's just great stuff. I mean, I know that you push it, and you push it because it works. It still works for me. Yeah, email, Twitter, yeah, I'm all for it. But I write letters.
Okay, so before we take our break and get to the more involved on the book writing side, when did you go from writing small books to then realizing you could write longer books and write longer books and assist people and develop that coaching company on your own?
Well, it actually went in two steps. The first step was that I started writing and publishing what I called special reports, because I could get a good amount of money for them and they were really targeted. And because I wrote one for speakers, trainers, and consultants, Cyber Power for Speakers, Trainers, and Consultants was the name of the report, a publisher came to me and asked me to write a book about, are you ready? Because this is going to date me. Getting on the information superhighway. I don't care what Al Gore says. I was writing about it first. That book came out in 1995, and it resulted in 2 more large book contracts after that. So that's when we went from small to big. The market said it was a good idea.
Well, again, everyone, don't let the dates in any way just decrease the value of the approach and application. And that is what he was doing with you. He's writing special reports. By the way, a lot of you do this in white papers today. Some of your micro content, you're writing certain things. But that's the ability to create this value proposition, right? And show them that, yeah, you are a resource. Well, I was doing that, 35, 40 years ago. And that's why he keeps them moving forward. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Well, I'm going to take a short break. When I come back, there's a lot more valuable lessons here to learn from Wally. Some of you can say, hey, I just thought I should write a book. I think about this. Now that I've written 3, all with Wally's assistance in different degrees, there's certain do's and absolute don'ts when it comes to writing a book. So we'll be right back with Wally Bock, my writing coach, and the Massimo Show. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Group. And did you know over the last 12 plus years, we've worked with thousands of independent contractors, solopreneurs, and small business owners and helping them achieve the business and the life that they've always desired. To learn more how we could possibly help you achieve your goals, please visit www.massimo.coach. That's www.massimo.coach. Hey, this is Rod with the Massimo Show. Welcome back. Yeah, we're speaking today with my writing coach, Wally Bock. We're about to talk about how he became a coach. And folks, I promise you, this is so applicable to today. It's amazing. It's amazing the parallels between him making the shift and what's going on today and how you can make the shift as well. So Wally, let's dig right into it. I understand now you're writing books. You're doing really well, financially really well. You're also speaking. In fact, you're speaking across the globe. You're on an all-time high, right? Things are great. So did it stop? What happened? When did the music stop and why? And why did you decide to make a shift and adapt to the market? What was going on?
Well, there was something you may have heard about. It was in all the papers, Rod. It was 9/11. And what happened after 9/11 was that travel just got awful. I had been traveling all the time. I didn't particularly like traveling for business, but it was something that I had to do the kind of work I was doing. 9/11 happened. Travel got awful. It got harder. There were less flights. And so I figured, well, I'm going to come off the road and do something. Now, what am I going to do? Well, up until that internet book I was telling you about, all of the books that I wrote were by myself. And I wrote Cyberpower for Business, the one that won Inc. Awards, with a guy named Jeff Sinet. And I discovered that I really liked working with somebody else, that it was just great chemistry, and I learned, and we could each do different kinds of things. So I thought, well, maybe I'll become a ghostwriter. Ghostwriters do that thing. I talked to a couple of my friends who did that work and found out what they thought and how they thought it should go. And I started that about, I would say, almost 20 years ago now, right? Close on 9/11.
Everyone, please listen to what's happening. You see, travel stopped. That sounds familiar, right? Major global event. Well, that sounds familiar, right? People being scared, worried, wondering, panicking. Wow, that sounds familiar. So what did Wally do? He adapted. He looked at what he was good at and said, you know what? I can still move forward. In fact, I can grow from here. It's very similar to, now different, but when I started the Massimo Group 2008 with the Great Recession, I also adapted and grew. You all have an opportunity to do this. So Wally, kudos to you. You start adapting. How do you get the word out? Again, is it letters? I mean, how do you get the word out? Hey, folks, if you want to write a book, I'm your guy. How do you tell people that?
I started by talking to all of the people that I knew that I thought might have clients of their own that were interested in writing a book. As I recall, it was Mike Myatt that pointed you in my direction. So there was that. I was on Twitter in the early days, and I got a couple of early clients that way. And then from there, it was just working. For the last 10 years or so, it's been almost entirely referral business, which is, as you know, great, but not enough.
Great, but not enough. But anytime someone says, hey, Rod, I'm thinking about, I say, stop, to call Wally. It's the first thing I say, stop, call Wally. He can help.
And I'm grateful.
Yes. And by the way, you have actually worked with some of our clients and written books with them, which is key. By the way, the magic word there, folks, we'll get into this. He's not writing books for people. That's not what he does. he writes with people and creates their story out to the marketplace.
You just outlined the two different kinds of ghostwriters, or people who call themselves ghostwriters. There are ghostwriters who will come in, take your stuff, go away, and come back with a book. And there are ghostwriters like me who want to be a writing partner and work on the project with you. It helps if you know which kind you want. If you don't want to have anything to do with it and you're willing to take what you get, go with number one. If you want to get the best possible book you can get, go with number two.
Couldn't agree more. From personal experience, I could not agree more. So, Wally, you've built a business, you've adapted, you're moving forward. So what's going on now with the pandemic based on this recording? Have you seen something similar? Do you need to adapt again, or no, you got a client base built up and you're just moving forward?
You've got to adapt some, because I've got clients falling off and stuff. But I'm at the stage of this business where essentially I'm working now like I was working before the virus hit. I've got a couple less clients. Neither of them was ever going to be a great one, so I don't feel bad about really losing them in the long run. And I've got other clients who, they said, wait a minute, where's the opportunity in this COVID thing? I know I'll have more time to work on the book, and they have. So a little bit of adapt because you got to, but not much for me.
Now, you have a unique business in that, look, I have a business where I need to scale just because we have to scale if I want to create the margin and all that. You have a unique skill set, unique talent. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are saying, yeah, but based on what I do, I can't just, like Rod, go out and start hiring people and teaching them my ways. So have you ever considered scaling, or just, when it comes to the word scale, I mean, you're doing really well financially, you have great margin in your life, you got a great life. So in your world, is that your vision?
Well, scaling for me means royalties. When I do ghostwriting work, like you and I have done, there's no royalty. It's fee for service, and it works, and that's great stuff. But there's another whole part of my business that writes books that I earn income on. And I write under my own name and a couple of other names. And when people ask me, what's your retirement program? I tell them it's royalties, because that's what it is. As an aside for maybe some of your people, I figure that I need to do 5 hours a week of work on products that will pay me down the road.
I like that approach. Always looking to the future and allocating for down the road passive income. Love it. And of course, I learned that one from, I've always good credit where it's due. I learned that one from reading the book, The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. He talked about that as well. Okay, so listeners, listen up. If you ever thought about writing a book, you got to stay on. If you're saying, hey, I'm never going to write a book, you should stay on. But look, you can vacate. But we're going to talk about what it means to write a book, what's the value, what's the process, or the options, and everything in between. We get back with our bonus session with my writing coach, Mr. Wally Bock. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Show. And oh boy, am I pumped. My new book, Knowing Isn't Doing, well, when it launched, it hit #1. That's right. Top-selling sales book in the entire country on Amazon.com. We're so excited to share many of our proprietary Massimo methods to allow our readers to start finally building that business and the life they've always desired. To get your own copy or learn more, visit www.knowingisn'tdoing.com. Hey, welcome back to the Massimo Show. This is Rod Santomassimo, and our special guest today is one of my coaches, and that's my writing coach, and that's Mr. Wally Bock. So, Wally, let's talk about the writing thought, the writing process. Everyone seems that one day I'm going to write a book, right? That's what everyone seems to say. But there's so much more than just the idea of writing a book. So, it actually happened today for me. Someone on one of our Facebook pages asked, Rod, you've written so many books. What do you think I should be asking myself? So, Wally, I'll ask you. When someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to write a book, what are some of the initial questions you may ask them?
Okay, you got to answer 3 questions up front. Question number 1 is, who's going to read this book, or buy and read it, more importantly? Question number 2, how is it going to affect your business besides any income that you make from the book? Because you won't make a lot from the book, but how will it affect it? Will it position you in a way? And Rod, folks, is my single most strategic client. every book that we have worked on, Rod has had a clear idea of what it was going to do for his business, who was going to buy it, and why they were going to buy it, and what they'd get out of it. The third thing you got to think about is why you're the perfect person to do the book. Now, this is a little bit of make-up story sometimes because there really are no new ideas. My friend Michael LaBeouf likes to say that the great ideas are too important to be new. And that's true. You know, I love Rod's books and I love what they do, but there's nothing new in there. What's new is the way he presents it and approaches it. And that's what you got to identify for yourself. Then you need to do a little bit of research, because I guarantee you that you don't know what you don't know about the writing process. And if you don't figure some of that out up front by talking to me, by reading some things and so forth, what's going to happen is you'll find out what you don't know at a time when it counts instead of when you have a time to deal with it. So that's the basics, Rod.
Okay. And those are all, everyone has to understand those questions because it's so important. Because I'll tell you, I haven't had this experience yet, and I hope I won't, knock on wood, but to go through all that effort, and it really is a significant effort to write a book, even when you have a great coach and a writing partner like I do, for it not to be successful, a hit to the ego, yeah, but also for it not to be viable from a business standpoint and grow your business, just because you failed. So that means you failed somewhere along the process of understanding who the market is, who the audience is, what the value is. So that's so important. So Wally, I was introduced to you, as you referred to earlier, by a mutual colleague, consultant, strategic guru, really, Mr. Michael Myatt. And I remember when I first came to you, this was 2009, maybe, I think it was, with this thought. And I know I had several ways I wanted to go, but you share with me, Rod, it's not about you, right? It's not your story. You don't have a story to tell yet. And then I didn't. I did not have a story to tell because I didn't. And that's something I think the audience needs to understand. Just because they think they have a story doesn't really mean they have a story. And I didn't have a story. I did. So what you suggested to me was, let's go out and interview some of these top producers you want to talk about and tell their stories. Let's figure out their stories. So, Wally, why was that so important then? Why did we go that direction?
You were at the beginning of your business at that point. And at that point, what the book needed to do, and you came to me with this part of it, what the book needed to do was make your reputation. Before anything else, people out there had to say, oh, yeah, Rod Santomassimo, he's the guy who wrote that book. And that book had to be something that captured their interest and so forth. You needed to demonstrate expertise. That was how it was going to help your business. And it needed to be valuable to practitioners, in this case, commercial real estate brokers. And so we told the story of successful commercial real estate brokers. And so anybody who read it got something out of it. But it was Rod's book where those stories were. So what Rod got out of it was a reputation and a demonstration of value. His comments in that book demonstrated the kind of thing that he can do for clients.
And I will share with you, I would say today, beyond our sales team that calls, and I don't suggest social media, that's still, we get a majority, not the token, but even that book is now, that book's got to be at least, well, it's got to be 8 years old. Even today, when we ask clients, how do you hear about us? They'll say, I read Rod's book. I mean, that's the number one source. I read Rod's book. There's value to books, people, when you do it correctly. And then, of course, we'll get into the marketing and distributing and all that stuff as well. And the second book we both wrote, so I had no idea how to write. And what we did was, let me share it, and why you can remind me. Why you used to ask me, Rod, what is the objective of this chapter? That was the objective. Go ahead and interview a client, get the transcript, tell me what you think the highlights are, and let me craft the story. So that's what I did. I gave Wally a transcript of an interview. I told him what I thought were the salient points, and then he would craft the story behind the chapter. And it was just back and forth, back and forth. It was just more like a tennis match. Wally, here's what I got. Rod, no, do this. Wally, here's no, Rod, no, do this. And it became just a process. It did. But as Wally could tell you, in fact, and I would say for every hour of work I put in, I bet there was 3 hours easily on your end. Is that a fair estimate?
That's probably right.
Yeah. So back then our relationship was different because that I had no idea what I was doing and Wally was doing all the writing. So then we wrote a second book together, still focused on commercial real estate at that time because I wanted to forge a specialty with teams, and I wrote about teams. And same thing we did there. stories about teams, same exact format, back and forth, transcripts from me telling more about the story that I thought when I was learning more about storytelling, and Wally would do that. And we knew that book, by the way, Wally, we knew that book wouldn't sell as well because it was so specific to one section.
But I'll tell you what, I have been quoting that book in places because what's happening right now around how do teams work, there's some big lessons in that book. I was on a call last night with some other writers around the country and talking about how teams were going to change. And I keep going to that book as a reference point because you really nailed some of the folks that we talked about and what the key points were. And yeah, it's specialized, but it's also got some real good general value that I think is going to pay off here.
You mentioned earlier, it wasn't just you don't write books for the money the book itself sales generate. It's not really realistic to think you're going to make it rich from a book. It just doesn't happen, quite frankly. I'm not writing Harry Potter, I'm writing business books. So what I found out, though, the interesting point was we didn't get as many clients from the book, but the clients we did get paid us exponentially more than the clients that from the first book, because it was all about consulting versus coaching, and the assignments are much, much deeper. So from a revenue standpoint, where the sales of the book was probably a fraction, maybe 20% or 25% of the first book in volume, the revenue is probably at least half of the volume and revenue I was receiving from the first book. It was just, you got to understand the dynamic of the book. So now we're on our third book, which is coming out in October, called Knowing Isn't Doing. And this is a general business book for all entrepreneurs, because my vision is to coach beyond commercial real estate. And so Wally and I got together and we said, this is now it. But Wally, why can I now write this book? Because this really is my story now. So what allows me to write the book today that I couldn't write back in 2008?
I don't know. Is there anything else that maybe you can do better now than you could do in 2008? To be serious, part of it is that you've grown in your business. You've had all kinds of coaching that helps you do that. You've thought about it. You've tried different things. And all of that is what found its way into this book. I think you've also had the experience of talking about the business with a lot of people. And so when it came time to write the book, this time we had the process a little bit reversed from the first two.
So let's talk about that. How do you see the process? Because it is different than the first two. So what was the process like from your perspective on this third book?
Let's go back to the second book for a minute. The book was a back and forth thing. You would decide what we wanted to do. We'd interview people. We'd get a transcript. And then we'd talk about it, and I'd go away and write it. On the third book, you did all that same stuff, but you wrote that first draft. Now, granted, there are a couple of those first drafts for chapters that I pulled apart like plucking a chicken. But most of it was good, solid stuff, and it was dead on in your voice because yours was the voice that was saying it. It was readable because you were doing it out loud. And we always write for the ear, not for the eye. You hear in your head, and that makes a better book. So the process was an extension of the way we did the first two.
Okay. And I couldn't agree more. It really was. And it continues to be a fantastic relationship. And, will I write more books? I hope so. I do believe, Wally, that this book will blow away any book I've ever written.
Since I've had the opportunity to actually read it, where none of your listeners have, yeah, I think it is. I think it's the best book you've done. I think it's got both the widest reach and it goes deeper on a bunch of issues than either of the first two. Agree. So let's talk about now. Someone wants to write a book. They think it's all I need to do is just get it written, and then I'm going to sell 1 million copies, right? That's all I need to do. Another podcast guest was Bob Berg, who wrote the book, The Go Giver. A friend of mine who used the Ghostwriter.
Okay. Well, now, did you work on The Go Giver?
No, I had nothing to do with The Go Giver. He used a different ghostwriter for a kind of process I couldn't do, but I've known Bob for 20 years. So
yeah, 1 million copies of that book across the globe. And people think that's what's going to happen. People think they're going to write the next Harry Potter. It just isn't the way it is. In fact, Wally, based on your experience, and I think based on stats, what makes a book successful? Is there a volume they say if you sold this many copies, it was a success?
I think we had to go back to what those first questions were. What do you want this book to do for you or your business? If it does it, it's a success. If you want to go and get a bestseller, I can't guarantee you that. Nobody can guarantee you that. Bob couldn't guarantee it. when he did the first book, but the book struck a chord. I mean, it's got good material and all the rest of it, but it was one of those things that struck a chord, like those chicken soup books that Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen wrote. You know, they're not great books, but they struck a chord and they took off. If it happens, great, I'm all for it. But I will never guarantee to a client that'll happen, because it is more likely that you'll sell a limited number of copies. They'll boost your business if you spend some time doing it right. They'll get you to where you want to go, to what we call the next level and so forth. And that's a success for me.
Okay, so you now have the book. You've written it. It's out there. It's published. Well, because I'm going down your list. Well, let's go from, it's not published yet. You got to edit it.
You got to edit it. You got to edit it. Say that again. Say it with me, Rod. Say amen. You got to edit it.
You got to edit. Wait. No, you do not have to edit it. You have to get an editor to review your book.
You need a professional editor. Actually, what you really need is a professional editor and a proofreader, in that order, because they do different things. But I mean, I'm a pro. I've been writing professionally now for 50 years. I need an editor. Hemingway needed an editor. Danielle Steele needs an editor. You need an editor.
Yeah, amen, brother. Actually, this third book, you did it first. Then I hired a professional editor. Then I hired a proofreader, and I was shocked how many errors, issues, changes that proofreader. I couldn't believe how many things that third person saw that none of us saw you needed. And even when we put it out for the soft launch, someone found an error and we changed it before the national launch coming out. But yes, editors are so essential. And just don't go out to outline stores and find the cheapest editor you can find. Huge mistake.
You'll find 2 posts on my writingabookwithwally.com blog about how to get an editor for your book. You have no excuse.
Okay, can you give me that URL one more time?
Writingabookwithwally.com. We're not into subtlety here, Rod.
No. People thinking about it need to know you have to get professional help. I mean, that's the way it is. So now you got an editor. So now guess what? Okay, I got all that done. I'm still going to sell 1 million copies. But now you mentioned that word earlier, publisher. So what's the role of a publisher? Because heck, I could just take it on Amazon and print off, paperback copies myself on demand, and I'm a self-publisher. It's me easy. People can buy millions of copies on Amazon, and that's all the publishing I need. Is that real?
Rod, you're such a card. First of all, let's understand something. People say, I want to self-publish. So what that means is you are the publisher. Self-publish, that means you do it. So what do? You find, qualify, and hire the editor and the proofreader. You make sure that there's somebody who can do internal layout so your book doesn't look like a multicolored typescript when it hits Amazon. You get the cover designed, and you get it designed by somebody who knows how to do a book cover. So you need to put the ISBN. Oh, yeah, and you get the ISBN number for the book so that you can put it on it. Okay? You do all of the other marketing stuff. Now, a legacy publisher does that routinely. If you self-publish, you either have to do it or hire somebody to do it.
Right. And the first 2 books I self-published, after learning the lessons in the first book with the editors and the cover design and the formatters. So we actually use the same team on the second book, a little different on the third book. And those were self-published. Now, folks, you can self-publish if you have a specific niche that you're following and or you're willing to spend the money to market to that niche if you want to get the word out. That's why I'm not self-publishing this book. Because if I wrote another real estate book, yeah, I can do that again because I know how to get to that specific audience. This time, I decided not to go with a publisher because now this just happens. It's going to happen naturally for everybody. You start writing, you start meeting writers. And in fact, some of my closest friends are New York Times bestselling authors. And I got the introductions to the publishers. The problem was, you're a true legacy publisher, you're planning to get that book out if they accept it for 18 months, 24 months, and go back to Wally's first question, who's my audience? What impact will it be on my business? I don't wait 2 years for an impact on my business. So the other option we call a hybrid publisher, where you do some of the work and your hybrid publisher. I'm using a group this time called Cardinal. They are taking care of the distributions into actual bookstores and marketing and libraries. So there's now a fee for all those folks. Let's understand that. You're going to make less, but you're going to sell more books. And again, if your focus is on selling books and building your business, the fee you make from the book should not be really a consideration. So Wally, what's your thoughts about working with self-publisher, hybrid publisher, and or really legacy publishers?
Well, let me add a fourth one to that. The fourth one is the author services companies. And they usually handle most of the mechanical stuff. They don't do the marketing stuff that a hybrid will do, but they'll usually do the cover, the interior designs, editors, and that sort of thing. Key thing here is that the person that writes the checks make the choices, just like the rest of life. So if you go to a legacy publisher, the legacy publisher is writing the check. They are fronting the money for the book, and they will make a bunch of choices. You may or may not like them, and it will certainly take them a long time because they have a process. And they may ask you to do a 250-page book when you really want to do a 200 or a 150 because that's your topic. Legacy publisher writes all the checks, makes all the choices. Okay. Next step, if you want to go down the route, would probably be a hybrid publisher. Now, they're not writing checks. You are. So you get to pick what and how and which package you're going to take and so forth. They will can take care of the mechanical stuff for you and some of the marketing stuff. Rod told you about getting into bookstores, for example. Author services company is one more down from that. They can do all of the stuff except the marketing thing. They can get you through different ways to get it published, designed, and so forth. You or individual people you hire need to do all of those same things. So if you're looking at it as a continuum, at the one end you have longer time and less control, but you're not fronting that much money. At the far end, you're fronting the money and you're making control, but you're making decisions about stuff you may not understand. So most of the clients that I have one client right now with a legacy publisher. Almost all the rest are either hybrids or author services companies to handle the stuff in between. I don't know if that answered your question, pretty long, but hey.
It definitely does. Yeah, I just think I'm laughing because I remember the first book, I had a local guy that I knew that did some of my website design, and he actually designed, and he's a great guy, don't get me wrong. He actually designed my first book cover. I think we had 3 choices and I picked one. Now, this latest book, look at hundreds of covers, different titles, different focus groups on titles. And so it's a much different process. It just is. You have to understand it going in. So, Wally, I know we've taken so much of your incredibly valuable time.
I'll send you the bill, Rod.
Yeah, I know you will. So let's do this. What parting words of advice would you give someone? Well, you've built your business, you've adapted, you've figured things out. Now you're working on your business, you're doing it passive income. But in regards to books, if you gave us the 3 questions, anything else you want to share with them before they say, I'm going to do this? Anything else you share with them?
Do the research first. Talk to somebody like me. There's stuff you can read. I can point you to that. But do enough research to know what you're getting into. No matter what you think, and everybody that I've ever worked with thinks they're going to be the exception to this, and nobody has been yet. It's going to take you a year or more. If you are in mid-career and you've got a lot of stuff going on, and you're probably in midlife, you got kids at home, most of my clients do, it's going to take you a juggling act for a year to get it to work. So I would say keep this in mind. Your relationships come first. If you shred your relationship to write a book, you're not going to be any better off than you are today. Your business comes second, because if you don't have the business to use the book, it's a waste of money. Then the book is important. And if you work it that way, the other 2 things get real good later.
Man, amen, brother. Like someone who's lived that, I can tell you that is so true. So, Wally, I can't thank you enough for sharing your insights with us, and for personally for being my partner in regards to our business writing and book writing. And there'll be more projects coming down the line, I know for a fact. And by the way, as I always sign off on the podcast, you've all learned so much. You got so much knowledge now that Wally has provided, but it doesn't mean anything unless you actually use it.
Because isn't doing.
Knowing isn't doing, as we would say here at the Massimo Group. So, Wally, thank you so much for your time. Everyone else with the Massimo Show, go out and do. Share this podcast with your friends, share with your colleagues, heck, share with your dogs, whatever, but please share it. Until next time, this is Rod Santomassimo with The Massimo Show. I want to thank you for listening to this version of The Massimo Show. And please, please go out and share this with your friends, your colleagues. Heck, share it with your dog. Just share it. And more importantly, just give me some feedback, good, better, and different. We all grow from understanding what our audience wants to hear. So until next time, this is Rod Santomassimo with The Massimo Show. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Group. And did you know over the last 12 plus years, we've worked with thousands of independent contractors, solopreneurs, and small business owners in helping them achieve the business and the life that they've always desired. To learn more how we could possibly help you achieve your goals, please visit www.massimo.coach. That's www.massimo.coach.